Working for Stephen Kingman was a challenge, but one I embraced. For 5 years, I had been by his side, managing his chaotic schedule, ensuring his coffee was just right, and silently watching as he ruled the business world with ruthless precision. I admired him even if he rarely acknowledged my efforts. He was cold, demanding, and distant, but somewhere along the line I had fallen for him, not that I ever let it show. To him, I was just Mia Carter, the dependable secretary who made his life easier. That day, when he called for the critical file during the board meeting, my heart sank. It wasn't where I had left it. I fumbled through my folder, panic rising as his gaze turned icy. "How could you be so careless, Mia?" he snapped, his voice cutting through the room. My cheeks burned as everyone stared, and something inside me broke. I had given everything to this job, to him, and this was how he treated me? Later, I discovered the truth. Veronica, the new intern, had taken the file to sabotage me. But by then, it was too late. The damage was done, and Stefan had already humiliated me in front of everyone.
I didn't mean to snap at her. Well, maybe I did, but only because I held Mia to a higher standard. She never failed, until that day. Her panic was clear, and it stirred something uncomfortable in me. Regret, guilt. I dismissed the thought. This was business. There was no room for feelings. That evening I sat in my office staring at the empty chair across from me. Mia had been unusually quiet after the meeting, and I couldn't shake the image of her downcast eyes. She had always been my anchor, my constant. Without her, the day felt wrong. I told myself it didn't matter, mistakes had consequences. But as the days went by, her absence became harder to ignore. Veronica tried to fill the gap, but she lacked Mia's instinct, her ability to anticipate my needs. The office felt chaotic, and the coffee was awful.
I couldn't do it anymore. After 5 years, I had reached my breaking point. Stefan's words during that meeting replayed in my head. Did he even see me as a person? Did he realize how much I had sacrificed for him? When I handed in my resignation, I expected him to fight it, to at least ask why. Instead, he brushed it off. "Is this another one of your fits?" he said, barely glancing at the letter. That hurt more than his words in the meeting. So I left. I started job hunting, trying to move on, but no job felt right. No other role matched the challenge or satisfaction of working for Stephen Kingman. Yet I couldn't go back. He didn't need me, or so I thought.
When Mia's resignation letter landed on my desk, I dismissed it as a momentary lapse in judgment. She'd come back. She always did. But as days turned into weeks, and her desk stayed empty, a gnawing sense of loss took hold. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in work, but nothing felt right. Meetings were a mess, my schedule was all over the place, and Veronica was lacking. I found myself snapping at her more often, my frustration growing. At a family gathering, I felt Mia's absence more than ever. For years, she had accompanied me, acting as a buffer between me and my judgmental relatives. This time, I was alone, and their questions hit harder. I missed her steady presence, her quiet competence. That's when I knew. I needed her back, not just as my secretary, but as something more. The thought unsettled me, but I couldn't deny it anymore.
I was surprised when Veronica called, asking if I'd consider returning. Her tone was clipped, almost annoyed, and I couldn't help but wonder if Stefan had put her up to it. Still, I refused. I couldn't go back to a place where I felt so undervalued. Then the calls started, unknown numbers I ignored, only to hear Stefan's voice on my voicemail, sounding uncertain. I didn't return them. I needed to move on, for my own sake. But when I saw his car parked outside my apartment for the 5th day in a row, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Annoyed, I called the police, thinking it was some stalker. Imagine my shock when Stephen Kingman stepped out of the car, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him.
I didn't care how it looked. I needed to see her. When the police arrived, I felt a flicker of embarrassment, but it disappeared the moment Mia stepped outside. Her eyes widened in disbelief when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, arms crossed. "I needed to see you," I said, the words spilling out. I can't do this without you, Mia." Her expression softened, but she didn't invite me in. Instead, she stood there waiting for me to explain. So, I did. I told her how much I missed her, how I had taken her for granted. She listened, her walls slowly coming down. When she finally invited me inside, my gaze fell on a small table with trinkets I'd given her over the years. A pen, a paperweight, a mug from a business trip, each one bringing back memories. My chest tightened as I realized how much she had cared, even when I hadn't. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice quiet but sincere. "I didn't realize how much you meant to me until you were gone." She stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then to my surprise, she laughed. "You're really bad at this, aren't you?" "Terrible," I admitted, a small smile breaking through. but I'm willing to learn if you'll give me a chance.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was Stefan Kingman really apologizing? Did he really just ask me out? I was shocked, but I agreed instantly because it felt like if I staled even a bit, he would have a breakdown, and I did not want my ever-mighty boss ad crush to be in that situation. I started back at the company, and I can see the sigh of relief on people's faces. It came to my knowledge that Stefan had been a nightmare while I was gone, snapping at people, making everyone work overtime and whatnot. I realized few things after starting the dating phase. He was bad at expressing his emotions, but was learning, and to my surprise, he was clingy, and he did not realize that, just like his feelings for me in those 5 years. He started picking me up and dropping me off to my apartment, spend time with me in office, during lunch, stealing kisses every chance he got. Weekends were times when he stayed at my apartment or took me to his. He would cook, clean, and cuddle with me, but later he entirely moved into my apartment as I refused to go to his. According to him, he did not get enough time to stay with me, and he was still learning. He honestly did not look like a ruthless CEO like others say, but rather a big dog asking for attention. And honestly, I had no complaints.